Okay, this angle makes it look like I'm not wearing a shirt, but I am, I swear. I am wearing a shirt. Okay, so you guys had asked to see a Daffodil tutorial before I actually uploaded the Plan With Me video, in case any of you want a theme share or anything. So I have gladly obliged, and that is coming up. So if you have any suggestions on how to improve a next tutorial I do, please let me know, because this is the first one I've ever done, so it's a little awkward for me to explain. I've never really taught anyone anything, especially on drawing, so I may need some tips. If you do like it and you find it helpful, definitely let me know as well, because I want to make these as easy to understand as possible. That being said, I hope you guys enjoy, and let's get into it. So the first thing I try to do is I try to go with the shape of the center. So I start with a large kind of oval. Obviously don't worry about these being perfect, because flowers themselves aren't perfect, and it goes for a more natural look. So we've got the big center here, which is going to represent this part here, the little bell center shape. And then I'm going to draw a second circle, which is going to be that part there, the base. Like that. Next, as you can see, daffodils kind of have like this kind of curvy, very light petal shape. I'm really sorry for all my descriptions here, because I don't really know the anatomy of flowers. I'm just going based off of the appearance of flowers. So we're going to basically make this first circle really wobbly. Like that. I'm going to erase all of these lines just so you can get a better idea of how this is going to look. And then we're going to connect this little circle to the big one just by drawing two curved little lines there. And I'll make this a little bit darker so you can see better. Like that. And I made this one a little too wobbly at the bottom, so I'm gonna smooth that out a little bit. Just like that. So now we've kind of got this shape going on here, and the base of the flower. So next we're going to work on the petals. And I think daffodils generally have about 6 petals, and I try to space them out so that they're all somewhat even. And basically you want to kind of go for where this one we've got the center kind of facing this direction. That's where we're gonna kind of have the petals going for. So I'm gonna have petal going this way, one going that way, and going that way. You get the idea. But we kind of want to make them curved, like they're all opening out from the center. Like that. Like I said, don't worry too much about the shapes being perfect, because we're not going for perfection. For petal shape, I'm generally just going kind of with like a teardrop, but a very rounded one. So like that kind of shape. And they can be pointed if you want them to be. They can have more of a point, or they can be rounded. I prefer the rounded look. So we got one there. And don't worry too much about, following any little lines. So what I generally do is I'll have 3 of the first petals, and I'll keep a little space in between each of them, and in between those is where the next 3 petals will go. This part looks a little awkward, so I'm just going to fix that.
All right, so then next, as you can see here, I had this little like lip of the petal, I guess, where we've got the little, honestly, I should have learned the terminology for flowers, but these little center things are gonna come out, and I kind of made this one shaped a little bit differently. So what I'm going to do is actually add a little curve here. And then we're gonna draw our little nubbies. Like that. And next, just a little detail I like to add on a lot of my petals is kind of the folds of the petal, because obviously petals aren't always open exactly perfectly. So I just kind of go off of the curves. And add little lifts. I'd like to say like every second or third petal I go on. And let's see. You want to make them pretty smooth, you don't want to make them too jagged, and try to follow the flow of the petal itself. So where this one's going in that direction, you want to continue it like a little wave. There. So we've got the outline done, and next we're going to move on to the actual ink. I'm going to use first a thick pen, which is my Sakura Pigma Micron pen in an 08. It's a pretty thick size for an outline, which is what I like to go with, because then I'll go with the finer pen and do the shading. So I'm going to start with the inside and work my way out. Also, when I'm outlining the pencil, or rather when I'm going over the outline with my marker, I try to make my lines a little more jagged, because those are going to allow me to get these nice fine details a little better, because I'm going to bring all of my finer lines in from those jagged marks. It'll make more sense when I go over it. And to do that, I'm basically just drawing as if I'm a child and I have a really shaky hand. Obviously you don't want to go crazy, but just kind of like you just have a shaky hand. And if you do have a shaky hand, then great, this is for you. Alright, now for the finer details. When I'm shading, I try to go with the shape of the petal. So if this petal, for example, this bottom one, is going in this direction, and I broke my pencil, this direction, then I want my lines to follow that kind of curvature. Same with these ones. This is going in this direction, so I want my lines to go in that direction. You want them all to be coming out from the center, and I do a little bit on the tips as well for the more delicate tips. And then for the center, I basically want all of my lines to be going kind of in all directions, but stemming from the center. I also tend to have shading be heavier near the center to add a little more depth, and then finer, thinner lines at the tips. So with this one, like that. So as you can see, I've got these kind of curving out towards the tip, and then a little the ones in the center tend to be more straight. Don't worry about them being perfect again, because again, we're not going for perfection, and these are just really fine lines, so you don't really have to worry too much about them being too great, to be honest. And then for here, say we have a little dip here, I tend to put a line there. There we go. So we've got a few along the tip, and most of them coming from the center. I may go over this in a few layers because again, that kind of darkness adds more depth. So over here, it's the same thing. And remember when I mentioned those little jagged lines? Like I've got one here, I've got one here, I've got one here. All of those little dips are where I'll add lines. And then a couple more at the tip too. And then again, we're going to follow the curve of the petal. There we go. For ones like this, I don't tend to put too much shading on the inside of that fold, just because there's no need to really. Where it's already a fold, you don't really need a lot of detail in it. I don't know if that makes sense. It probably doesn't, but I don't. So there we go. Like I said, that part I don't shade in. Have that, and then for the center, like I said, everything I kind of draw going outwards from the center, and then a little bit at like the tips as well. Same with the base. I try to draw, how do I describe that? For this little base, I basically do the reverse of this part here. So where these are all curving out like this, I want them to curve kind of in, as if it's like a reflection. Only much smaller, obviously. Like that. And then for this part, I'm just gonna make some short, stubby lines. Like that. Don't worry about them being curved or anything, because honestly, it's such a small surface area. You don't have to worry about too much flow. We're just really doing this for depth. Okay, now for these little curved bits, I'm basically adding a line at the bottom of each curve. So we've got this part here is shaped like this, more or less. So what I'm doing is I'm adding a line at like the bottom of each of these curves. So I go here, and like at this point here, I'd add a little bit of shading. The next one, shading. Next one, shading. So we got a curve, a little bit of shading. A curve, shading. Curve, shading. And like I said, we want them all to be kind of as if they're traveling or being sucked into the center. There we go. And as far as my brush strokes for these kinds of things, like I said, they're all very rounded for the petals, but they're very imperfect. They're very scratchy. I don't worry too much about making them smooth lines because they don't really matter. And once you color over them, they're not going to be very noticeable. So I'm just trying to make it as natural for my hand movement as possible. So it's kind of just like a flick of the wrist. So fine. And as you can see, I start off, at least with the way that my hand naturally works, I start off with more pressure as I start, and then it gets finer as I lose that tension because my hand can't keep that tension as I'm curving that way. So that's okay to have those kinds of finer lines as it progresses. That's also what gives it more depth at the base versus at the tip. Alright, so for coloring, for daffodils, I've got these 4 colors. It doesn't really matter what brand of marker you're using. I've used Crayolas, I've used the Tombows. I find it a little bit easier to blend with the Tombow, so that's why I'm using them for this one. So I'm starting with a super pale yellow. And for daffodils, they tend to have more white in them. I've seen a lot of daffodils that have a majority of white, but white's kind of boring to color with unless you're actually using an acrylic paint. So I'm just going to use the yellow, and I'm going to do it really sloppily, leaving a lot of white space in there. So it's like almost kind of like that. All these little white spaces I'd be leaving. And for the center part, I will color that in fully because they tend to be a bit more darker. There we go. Next, I'm going to go in with a more bright or darker shade of yellow. And this I'm going to use at the base and the tips of the petals. Basically anywhere where I've got the lines from the pen, I'm going to go over now with the yellow. And using the same kind of brush strokes as I did when I was outlining, I'm just kind of doing fine little swipes. Okay, then at the center, I'm going to go over that as well. Again, following those little brush strokes, or pen strokes. And then all along the inside. Same with the base. Actually, the base I'm going to color in entirely because that would naturally be a little bit darker from this angle where we've got like the lip of the centered flared out part. This would probably be a little bit more like shadowed from the light being blocked, so I'm gonna color it in fully. Then I'm going in with my darkest shade. I guess this is more of an orangey yellow. Works well for this kind of shadowing. And again, we're gonna go over the center bit and the edges and the inside. Oh, also for this, try not to make them thick strokes. You want to make them relatively thin. And we don't want them all, we don't want them too close together, otherwise it's going to make it really heavy. Like if you're going like that, it's gonna look a lot heavier and orange. We want to still keep a lot of it yellow. So I'm doing very fine strokes and keeping them relatively spaced. And then the very base of this, and along the inside, and then those little pen strokes at the folds of the top. There we go. I didn't draw any leaves or anything, but I'll just show you an example of how I draw my leaves. It's very basic. I don't go into nearly as much detail with the leaves as I do with the actual flower. I just kind of go in kind of a wave shape, and then another kind of reversed wave shape. Trying more or less to mirror the other side, but it doesn't really matter. They can be curves of any shape. I just kind of want it to be more or less fluid. Then I'll color it in with the green. And then I'll use a darker thin green. I've got these little Staedtler fine liner pens, markers, whatever you want to call them. They're fantastic, and they're like, I don't know, 15 bucks for a set of 20. And I'm going to follow the same idea as I did with the pen strokes here, only from like each corner of these leaves. And again, you want to be following the shape of the leaf like you would with the petal. So for this one, where the leaf, I'll use a pencil, where the leaf is curved this way, I want my pen strokes to be going in that direction. And same for that one. That tip is going that way, so my pen strokes kind of follow that direction. Same thing for every single leaf. If you want to draw the bases of your flowers, pretty basic. You're really just drawing, or I should say a stem, sorry. If you want to draw a stem for your flowers, you're kind of following the direction of the center of your flower. So where the center, like I said, is facing that kind of direction, you want the stem to kind of follow that line. So it would go there-ish. Color her in. And again, I'll add a couple more little pen strokes to add a little bit more depth. There we have it.
Alright, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you really enjoyed it. Like I said at the beginning, let me know if you have any tips on things you'd like to see in the future for tutorials, or if there's anything I could have improved on. If you did enjoy it, please let me know, because I want to know if I helped you out. Keep your eyes open for October's Plan With Me, which will be up next week, and until then, I hope you all have a good end of September, and see you soon. Bye!